We have a lot of questions in the chat box, but let me start our Q&A. And may I invite Mr. Eric Alberto, Jojo Ong, and then also, of course, Nerissa to the panel.
Morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be with
Yes.
COL and your many investor customers. No? And I hope you're all keeping well. Salamat.
Let me start with you, Eric. Let me start with you. The title of our conversation today is Challenging the Telco Industry. You were with PLDT for a long time, and you have seen how the incumbents operate. What kind of challenge is DITO really offering to the industry? Can you just tell us a few words about that, Eric?
Well, in a nutshell, the market is fast shifting. As you know, technology shifts are exponential. It follows Moore's law. No? Those of you who are followers of technology. And Moore's law changes in technology infers that about every 2 years or so, compute power actually doubles. And such is the pace of shifts in technology adoption. Marvin, the ongoing pandemic is actually showing us that consumers are actually adopting more technology and coming to be digitally savvy. And they're changing their lifestyles into and relying on technology to be able to afford a lifestyle that is cost-effective, convenient, but more importantly, also safe. This webinar, where we have, we're closing in on 1,000 participants, is a good example of that digital lifestyle. Now, when you look at the facilities that will enable the digital lifestyle, I think this country has ways to go in terms of really getting us to world-class standards on its status quo, but even more so that the continuing rapid demands for technology that our Filipinos would be wanting as we go about. And I'd like to give you a perspective of the sector. For many years, in fact, for over 25 years, this is the only country in the developing world that has over 100 million people in population that only has 2 mobile players. If you look at our countries within the ASEAN, even those countries smaller than we are, they have Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, with half of our population. They have 4 or 5 mobile players in operation in a much smaller market, and competition is actually benefiting the users and the consumers. And that proposition is exactly where DITO is positioned. Marvin, you know that similar to 8-9 years ago, and with the fast pace of technology, we're seeing the market shift from 3G to 4G 8-9 years ago, and now 4G to 5G. Now, this shift, combined with what I just mentioned earlier, the exponential preference of consumers that they have become digital savvy and will be demanding for more of this digital enablement to ensure that they get a better, they use these tools for a better lifestyle, necessitates a variety and an alternative provider. And this is where DITO comes in. I feel that we have the right positioning. We have no legacy baggage of old technologies. We're brand new technologies. We're right smack into that right timing of providing services. I'd like to mention this as well. When the third telco was announced in 2018, I think we did already a big service to the public where the incumbents have actually shaped up and improved their services, even without us getting the first subscriber as yet. And now I think there's been significant change to the market, thankfully, because of a healthier market condition. Now, going back to the point where we are, I think we have the right partner in China Telecom. It's one of the biggest in the world, I think 6th or 7th. But more importantly, they're the purveyors of the latest in technology. Whether we like it or not, the Chinese has been leading 4G and now even 5G technologies. As of year-end 2021, itong last January lang, at year-end of 2021, it's been reported that China already is closing in on 800 million 5G users. And certainly they're way ahead of the world in this platform and the use cases for 5G. And our partner is at the forefront and purveyor of these changes. And perhaps they're a year and a half ahead of the Philippine market. And certainly by this statement, I think we've got the right there in China Telecom that will bring the platform, the experience, the digital experience, the differentiated speed for mobile data, the differentiated and better customer experience from front, middle, and back office interfaces that we can give. And last but not least, DITO is actually aspiring to be the most or the highest value for money provider, by way of easy to buy, easy to use, value laden telco ICT services in the market. So in a nutshell, I hope I addressed your question.
I'd like to follow up on this. You talk about 5G technology. What does this really mean for the future of telco? Paki-explain nga dito sa mga nanonood sa atin. What change can this really mean for these people who are watching? Ano ba ibig sabihin niyang 5G?
Maraming dyan eh. I'd like to, ako rin, I've been, it's a continuing learning process, although I've been exposed to the industry for over 20 years and have been in talks with many of the leading vendors for 5G. Basically, 5G is a technology that can deliver over 100 times the speed of 4G, and it actually can compete or can be a good alternative to fiber. So ganong kalakas ang speed. So kung ang speed ng 4G is up to 100 Mbps, so multiply that by 200 times. So mga forgot the term for it. So 2,000 Mbps, something like that.
1,000 Mbps, wireless?
Potentially, wireless, potentially. No, not even fixed can develop that or can deliver that that speed. So this is really a breakthrough technology. Now, I think the counterpart of that's a very exciting proposition. But then you have to find. You could imagine that a lot of global players are finding the right relevant use case applications to use that technology, and because of the billions of dollars being put into this activity by many players worldwide, it will become like all the other old technologies, a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's going to be faster, it's going to be more vivid as an experience, it's going to enable lives. So as we speak around, there are many applications ranging from medical field to automotive to enterprise, but then eventually it will all down even to consumers in the way, perhaps into entertainment and gaming, in fintech, in the way we buy and trade goods, buy and sell and trade goods. In other words, you will find this to be a truly revolutionary platform by which people will not only communicate, but the way people will live their lives in the near future.
Pero Eric, sabi mo wireless eh. May towers ba dyan? Like what kind of infrastructure is needed? And do we even have the handsets to use that technology?
Siyempre, since wireless, kailangan you have to transmit it from a station to the end user. And 5G, in layman's terms, really brings the capability closer to the edge or closer to the end users. So in that regard, they have such a thing as microcells, where instead of cellular towers providing service within a 5 to 10 kilometer radius, you will see more smaller but cheaper and more efficient micro towers being located closer to the densification of users. So that's the promise of 5G. Now, this will be backhauled by a number of means, basically by fiber. But ang maganda dito, Marvin, if it's wireless, if it is 100 meters along or a few hundred meters from the end users, there are no wires to cut, diba? But it's giving you the throughput of fiber. So that's the advantage and the promise of this new mobile technology. Kaya nga revolutionary ito eh. Now, price point. Let's talk about price point. Again, I transport back like all technologies, 8-9 years ago. Balik na sa 2G to 3G. 2G to 3G, 2G phones, dati yung Nokia 3210, if you remember, magkano lang yun at that time. O meron ka doon, di ba? At that time, mura lang yun, kaya pinamimigay ng telco. Nung 3G, that's the start of the smartphone, medyo mahal. But in a year's time, nagmura yan, pinamimigay na rin ng telco. But as phones become smarter and there's more compute power on this port and more capability, nagmamahal. Now, 8 years ago, 3G to 4G. For about a year or two, mahal yan. When the price points got down to about less than 10,000, actually, the sweet spot in the developing world is anywhere from $150 to $200. So, sagay mo na 6 to 10,000. Pag bumaba yan ng ganyang presyo, you see the hockey stick adoption. Similar to how 4G happened about, say 7-8 years ago. 8 years ago, una, 2 months, tapos biglang nag-hockey stick. That is not going to be any different for 5G. No? Plus the use case applications that are going to proliferate the space. Now, having said that, in China, as I mentioned, 800 million users na in record nila. Now, I'm sure India, just the two countries lang, wag na natin isipin yung first world, yung India, China and India na lang. 800 million are already switched on to 5G in China. And I think there are a number of hundreds of millions are starting also in India. When this gets to billion point mark, you can imagine that economies of scale will bring the CPE's pricing down in a few months, even in less than 2 years. And that is where you will see hockey stick adoption happening in the developing market.
Sana.
All good. Sana. That's because
infrastructure mo. Eric,
ang point lang I want to point out, Marvin, hindi tayo, you and me and the rest of the consumers, hindi naman tayo ma-atras sa technology. Lagi tayong paabante. Dati, 3 years ago, happy ka na sa 5 Mbps, 10 Mbps. Ngayon, if you only get 5 Mbps to your own screen, you cannot join this webinar if you have 5 Mbps. I'll tell you, 6 months from now, I promise you, 5 Mbps is not good enough for the applications that people would want.
Yeah. So we need more. Kaya lang when I call now sa cellphone, walang signal eh. So ano infrastructure kailan? Where are you na ba now? Asa na kayo ngayon sa infrastructure that is required, which is aligned to your I saw that you already passed the audit by the government regarding your license, etc. And nasa na ba ka ngayon? Where are you now in that rollout?
As Donald presented earlier, some snapshot stats. No? We're in over 500 cities and municipalities. We have over 5 million subscribers as of year-end. But more importantly, we have over 4,000 towers and 4,000 more under construction and within commercial, will be fired commercially within the next 6 months to 1 year. Now, we're the only telco, Marvin, that has been subjected to a technical audit by the NTC as part of the CPCN. The telco has to meet those. And that the basic benchmarks are really speed, which is average 55 Mbps speed, which we are continuously meeting. No problem. In the last second audit, we registered nearly 90 Mbps for 4G and over 800 Mbps for 5G. Now, the other criteria or benchmark is coverage. Now, it took the incumbents 25 years to achieve 90% or so coverage, right? If you have to remember, DITO started rolling out network facilities only in beginning of 2020, which to note is also the start of the pandemic. So in the pandemic year, we rolled out about a record 2,000 towers. No? And last year, we rolled out another 2,000. So this is the pace at which we're rolling out the towers. And a lot of this capability can be attributed to the technical know-how and experience of our partner, the China Telecom. And as you know, and it's not there's not denying that the network elements that are used even by the existing incumbents are predominantly Chinese vendor provided, and they have a lot of experience in particularly in 4G and 5G. So that's where we are now. So it's a matter of just coverage. Just speed, walang issue. Physics na lang. When mobile is a shared network. If you're in a location where there is a cellular tower and mag-isa ka lang, you get full benefit of the throughput and juice of that network. Kung 100,000 kayo dan, you share that output amongst you, di ba? Kami, new player. There are 130, 135, if you're to believe the stats, 140 million SIMs out there shared between the incumbents, di ba? So there's an issue of congestion, particularly in some areas. Now, when we're a new player, you roll out and you open up, you're an empty bus. So you're going to be the fastest. No? Now, having said that, wala kaming issue sa speed. Kasi, pag naglagay ka ng tower dyan, we're actually a starter, we're a challenger, we're eating market share away from kasi fully saturated na yung market, mabilis yung sa amin kasi konti pa lang ang gumagamit. Now, the challenge for us is not speed. The challenge for us of the benchmark is coverage. As mentioned earlier, we met the second audit of 51% last year, September. We're probably at about, I'd say 55 to 57% coverage now with the towers that's already in place. There will be a third audit sometime in June and July, and the Telco tells us that they are confident of meeting 70% coverage by that time. And then the fourth year would be 80%, and the fifth year, 84%, where all gloves are off. No? Pantay-pantay na tayo. Napagalingan na lang sa service, not only in speed, but also in the experience you give your customers. Be assured. Is the experience you give them expedient and convenient? Are you delivering digital? Are your products available digitally? Can you be engaged digitally? And then are they easy to understand offers and easy to buy? And are they value laden? Highest, not the cheapest, but highest value for money. Now, this is the aspiration that we're all trying to do there.
We're looking forward, Eric. I'll pass on naman to Jojo kasi I want to understand more sa listeners natin about the spending naman. Itong CAPEX rollout mo. How much do you really need to bring in? And then, how will it be funded? Maybe Jojo can bring us up to speed.
Yes, thank you. And good morning. Without necessarily giving any forward-looking statements, I think it is sort of expected that the spending will be in the vicinity of about $1 billion per year. In fact, we have already spent that much, at least in the previous period. So in terms of funding, we already have, funding is typically two sides, right? You have equity and you have debt. So obviously, just like any other corporation, we are going to be maxing out our debt to save on the equity side. So in this case, the debt side has already been, we have already commitments of up to $4 billion for term funding, long-term funding. We're talking about 10 to 15 years or more. That's already in place, but the definitive agreements have not yet been signed. So there's been a signed term sheet with the arrangers. And as I said, there have been firm commitments in excess of $4 billion. So we may not necessarily get the whole amount, but that's already in place. And we are, as we speak, we are finalizing the execution documents for the signing. Now, in the meanwhile, so, a logical question would be that, what were you using for funding since you started building the network in 2020?
Yes.
And this has been disclosed. It's in our financial statements that we have received, that we have issued already to the SEC. Two of those lenders who have committed to lend us in the term loan have already given us a bridge loan. So we have already drawn in excess of $1 billion on that facility. And the arrangement is that once the term loan kicks in, it will refinance the bridge loan, thereby transferring that loan from the bridge loan into the longer term loan. So that's in place. Now, in terms of the equity portion, which is obviously meant to share a percentage of both the CAPEX rollout of the network as well as the OPEX, that will be subject to the planned equity calls. As you're aware, the SRO, for example, of this company, DITO CME, which is the holding company that basically owns the local portion of the equity shareholding of DITO Tel, is actually meant to raise part of that. So the proceeds, bulk of the proceeds, in fact, of the share rights offer will go to the funding of DITO Tel's equity.
Good, good. So you're talking about equity, no? And
Yes.
I understand. So it's going to be DITO, but you have China Telecom behind. How are you able to raise all of this funding through debt? And what is China Telecom's participation in these funding commitments?
Well, you know, the funding commitments, well, the debt are from banks. In fact, the commitments are already from, in fact, 100% of them are from foreign banks. There is no local bank except a local subsidiary of one of those international banks. I'm not at liberty to disclose the names of those banks at this point because we have not yet signed the definitive agreements. But the role of China Telecom has been, well, they're not lending the company, obviously, it's the banks, right? But it's obviously the relationship of these, of basically China Telecom with these banks that have sort of opened the doors to us giving access to the funding. As I mentioned, the commitments, it's a term loan. It's going to be a club deal with a consortium of banks, small number of them, all foreign banks. And for all intents and purposes, it's oversubscribed. As I said, the commitments have exceeded $4 billion. We do not anticipate in borrowing the entire amount, so it will be allocated within that group. So the participation has been quite direct, I mean, involved in the negotiations. A number of them are Chinese banks, but not all of them are Chinese banks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously, and by the way, just to segue a little bit, it's not just in terms of the capital raising that China Telecom has been involved in. The relationship with our suppliers, as Eric mentioned earlier, the bulk of our equipment, not all of it, despite what some people say, our security equipment is American, for example, but the basic boxes, routers, switches, antennas, etc., have been predominantly Chinese. And again, China Telecom has used its clout and its relationship with the suppliers to get the best deals. So again, the role of China Telecom cannot be underscored, notwithstanding the fact that they have only a 40% share in the equity part. Their role at the back end, or rather at the back end, in terms of negotiation and facilitating all this. The term loans, the very good terms with our suppliers in terms of pricing and payment terms, even in terms of the technology transfer. I mean, you're talking about the design, the engineering, technical expertise that has been provided. As mentioned by Eric, we have already exceeded the previously held record of most number of towers built in a year. Now we've exceeded 2,000. That's never been done before in the Philippines, and we will continue to build at that pace, if not faster, moving forward.
Yeah.
The only limitation is really red tape, meaning local government permits.
So clearly, China Telecom is really supporting you here, no? And I understand there's a law. I don't know. It's in the president's hand already for signature. This Public Services Act, where foreign companies, I understand, can own 100% of telcos. My question is really, what will stop China Telecom from owning 100% of DITO Telecom and diluting UDENA in the process?
Well, first of all, let me answer the last question first. China Telecom cannot own 100% of DITO, even if it wanted to, because the law, there is a section of that law. There's a section in that, proposal, which will be either passed into law or approved by the president, which maintains whilst 100% foreign ownership is allowed, there is a restriction in terms of state-owned and controlled entities, of which China Telecom is one of them. SOCC is state-owned and controlled. So China Telecom being an SOCC cannot own more than 40%. So to answer your question, China Telecom cannot, even if it wanted to, I'm not saying there is no plan, in fact, anyway, to own 100% of China Telecom, of DITO Telecommunity. But of course, it can increase its equity investment, so to speak. Although again, there is no plan for that at the moment, but it could. The option is there, for as long as it maintains the 40% ratio. So which means that the Philippine counterpart, whether it be the public sector or the shareholder, the DITO CME, would have to maintain, combined, would have to maintain the 60% ownership.
I ask kasi
Joe,
yeah.
Marvin, can I just interject, if I may? I think the law, as proposed and pending approval of the president, is a step in the right direction for two major reasons. No? Most of the telcos in the developing world requires the support, no? Of foreign investments. It's one of the sectors that's most capital intensive, given the technology that is demanded. The investments in technology. Look at the kind of investments that telcos, at least in the Philippines, are doing. No? Prior to DITO's announcement, telcos were spending anywhere from 35 to 45 billion a year. No? Now their guidance capex with the third player is now moved up closer to 90 billion a year. It goes without saying it's one of the most capex hungry, and the shift in technology from moving from prehistorically 3G to 4G, 4G to 5G is a testament to that. So that's one. If you look at the telcos in much of the developing world, they have a foreign investor partner, and most likely it is the foreign partner is going to be a telco, because they are not a leading telco in the world, because they not only bring the technology, the financial muscle that's required for the capex, but equally important, they bring in the technical know-how to be able to execute an ICT and digital roadmap for any telco play, particularly in a market like ours. If you look at the incumbents, they have their own partners. If you look at the other countries, at least the more progressive and leading telcos within ASEAN na lang, have foreign telco partners. Because so it's a step in a welcome.
Yeah, my question kasi is for the benefit of the shareholders that will probably subscribe to this stock rights offering. Kasi I understand Udena is they have a lot of things in their plate. Right? We know that, and it may not be China Telecom that will probably come in. It can be another investor that can go into, and worry talaga is to the dilution of this listed company. The listed company is the one that owns 60%, di ba? Pero it can be diluted. Yun lang ang ano ko doon. What are there agreements to that na we can assure our shareholders that andyan ang Udena?
Well, I'd like to answer. Then Jojo has been with the company, with Udena Group, longer than I have. I don't know if there's any covenanted provision regarding that. What I can say, though, that the business dynamics changes, and we're in business, no? And business is about value creation and value appreciation, right? And while Udena has been investing in a number of businesses, times and environment changes in business cycles will tell you that there are some sectors which are more, how they call it, forward-looking, attractive than others. No? So some industries are more future-proof and are more attractive, within your particular portfolio, particularly in the major upheaval. Like a pandemic. No? So nag-iiba yung complexion ng attractiveness of which sector. Obviously, as in any business, everything has a price at the right values. Diba? Hindi naman irresponsible ang any businessman, particularly a business conglomerate of our size, to just irresponsibly, as I have been reading, that fire sale, everything must go. No, hindi naman ganon, because particularly as a traded company, you've got fiduciary responsibilities to all your stakeholders, not only the majority owner. No? And it doesn't make business sense to sell particularly when the prospects for this sector in a market, in an industry that's not very crowded, with still a huge lot of upside. I think business fundamentals tell you that unless there is a scorched earth nuclear war scenario, your the attractiveness of this particular sector is still very much there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this offering that you have.
Si Joe,
Sorry, Marvin.
Joe,
Yeah, may I?
Sorry.
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Let me just answer your question more directly. No, I think the way I understood it.
Yeah.
First off, I think again most people forget this. There are actually two companies. There's the operator, which is DITO Telecom, telecommunity, and then you have DITO CME, who is the listed entity, who is the holding company. So you have the operator who is not listed, and then you have the holding company which is listed, but does not operate. Okay. So to your question, first of all, let's talk about DITO Telecommunity. There is no plan to raise any. We have no capital raising plans at the moment. Will we? Of course, there's always that option, right? But at the moment, there is none. As I mentioned, the debt portion has already been sort of negotiated. We're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's and negotiating a few of the CPs. But essentially, for all intents and purposes, this is already done, and we're just waiting to sign the document. That, together with the anticipated equity infusions, which has already been planned, is already part of the long-term business model. Okay, obviously, DITO Telecommunity has a business model, and in that model, it is sufficient. So, meaning, as far as DITO Telecommunity is concerned, there are no immediate or medium-term plans to raise additional equity aside from what's already on our plate. Okay, on DITO CME side, remember the objective is to raise equity for DITO CME in order for them to put the equity to fulfill their equity requirements when it's called into DITO Telecommunity. So if the concern of the investor, which would only be at the DITO CME level, not the DITO Tel side, is for it to be diluted, then the only issue outside the SRO, because this SRO will already cause certain dilution, right? I mean, if you don't participate, then you get diluted. That's mathematical. Would only happen if there is another equity exercise that's going to be raised. The theoretical question about what happens to the UDENA holdings or the DITO CME holdings, the UDENA holdings into DCME. Let's not talk about DITO Tel, because I said DITO Tel will not move either way. It doesn't care as long as the Filipino counterpart remains 60%, then China Telecom remains 40%, and it's all status quo. So the only concern of the investors who are in this webinar at the moment is DITO CME. So for all intents and purposes, whether UDENA sells its stake in DITO CME partially, materially, or all of it, has no bearing on the investor, theoretically, right? The decision point as an investor in DITO CME is whether it believes in the investment potential or the value potential of DITO Tel. It has nothing to do with your counter, meaning what your other shareholder does has absolutely nothing to do with you. Now, in fact, the proposed law, if you think about it, opens up the options. Whereas before, foreign funds, now, as a retail investor, we're a drop in the bucket compared to the wealth and asset that is being managed by those professional institutional funds in the US, in the UK, and even in Hong Kong. Now, whereas before they were now restricted from coming in, they theoretically can come in. Now, if I am a holder of DITO CME shares, the potential that an institutional investor will come in is actually now higher with the passing of that law, number one. Number two, should there be an institutional investor who would be interested, unless he's willing to buy small bits and pieces in the market, he would therefore probably try to negotiate a block sale, right? If you start buying, again, if you think about it, put it in scale, even if they bought let's say a significant portion in DITO CME relative to the asset portfolio of a typical institutional investor like Capital or Fidelity or any of those big funds, this is nothing. This is a rounding off number. It's probably petty cash. So if they came in a material way for us, but not in a material way for them, they would move the market if they bought shares in the market, which would be good for the retail investor, right? Or conversely, if they came in a big way and negotiated, let's say, for a block sale with one of the brokers or whatever, right? Then that in itself would also enhance theoretically the value of the share, because then you now have a seal of good housekeeping by having a marquee investor as part of your shareholder.
Good thing you clarify that, no? Kasi, the stock price, where the market is down generally, and the stock price of DITO has gone down from its high. and you're offering at 488, somewhere around where it is being traded now. It appears that. So my question really is, what is the market not really seeing? You were high at 18 pesos. Now we're only close to 5 pesos. And what is the market not seeing? Itong sinasabi mo, Jojo, di ba? Parang wala pa kasing nangyayari. I don't know. Wala pa siguro nangyayari or people just speculated too early. What is the market? Why did you price it at 488? And it's there now. And what is the market not seeing? Yeah.
Eric, you want to answer this? Or you want to
well, okay. No. Okay. As Jojo pointed out earlier, the DITO CME's SRO activity is to raise funds to shore up our share of the capital into the capital call with our partner, China Telecom. No? In view of the continuing capital capex requirements of the telco, so that we can fulfill the network commitments and rollout of the telco. Now, having said that, when we are dealing with our lead underwriter, when we were talking about this, the price was typically stable already at about 8 peso range, 750 to 8 pesos. That was a few months ago. And then, you've got the resurgence of Delta that reared its ugly head until kailan ba yun? Hanggang mga June, di ba?
Yeah.
And then the market is really dampened, low activity, continuing lockdown, di ba? After the Delta, lockdown na naman ng merkado, di ba? Only to open it up, and then ngayon, sometime in December, another variant has come to the fore, which we're now experiencing today, di ba? So at that time, what we really envisioned when we looked at the valuation, we were trying to benchmark against a 611 share swap transaction that we did and was approved by SEC and PSE, yung November of 2020, and that 611 valuation was based on an independent asset valuation, pure asset player, wala pa naman commercial launch. Sometime done in October of 2020.
611.
Yung 611 yung stock swap, di ba? 611 pesos, di ba? Noong November of 2020. So that was based on an independent appraisal on assets that's been rolled out. So if you can imagine, Marvin, at 611, even prior to the commercial rollout, I think the market was in excited anticipation. It drove it all the way to 18. No? But then it had settled near about the 8 to 9 peso range. No? And then, of course, that there's continuing, and I think people see that, continuing non-stop rollout of the... Now, when we were talking about it, we were looking at the regional range of 611, thereabouts range, to allow the investors, retail and institutional investors, to be able to participate and catch up at the lower price, at a discount. Diba? But again, events have overtaken, and when we had to make a decision sometime, I recall December 17, andyan na yung ugly head ng Omicron, and the market is really, overall market is down, and the price is a dip, not only of DITO, but of all major issues, as you can see in the board right now. Diba? Yeah. And then what we saw that to be able to get that discount, we had to price it at even more attractive price of 488 to, sabi namin 488 to 588, if I recall, at the top end. And then when we had to make the decision, we went for, at that time, we made the decision, the price was doing at 550 to 565, December 17. We went for, to be able to provide an attractiveness to the SRO, we went for the lower end of the price spectrum, 488, which we feel is a very attractive price, albeit that it's subjected to a lot of this negative and bearish conditions in the market today.
Alam mo, Eric, as we speak now, kasi the nice thing about speaking in this conversation in the morning, the trading is open.
Oo nga.
Price mo is at 525.
Ayoko naman mag-ano ng ano, pero well, we thank your platform. And maybe people are starting to understand more about what we're trying to do. And the short and medium prospects. Salamat, Marvin. At least people are getting to understand. Now it's at a better discount. So.
We have a lot of questions in the forum now. Dumadami, ang dami. Tapos meron tayong advanced questions. But But my last question to you is, paano kung hindi ma-raise yung 8 billion from the public? They did not exercise. Will the bawal ba ang majority shareholder to pick it up? Or paano yun?
I believe there's been a backstop. No? So as typical of most issues that are similar situations. So there are various. Well, you're asking I guess you're asking a procedural question. So I think it should be more directed to the underwriters. But typically, what would happen is that you would first allow the existing shareholders to exercise, right, based on that ratio. That's the first tranche, and then there is a second tranche. And again, this is not something we invented. This is the process. The second wave or second tranche, would you call it, is that for people that have already would want to get more, let's say, for example, than their allocated portion, then they're going to be allowed after the first wave, assuming there is anything left over. And then on the third wave, assuming there is still something left over, it is now offered to the QIBs, the qualified institutional investors, participants. So there at that point, if there is still theoretically anything left over, then yes, there is a backstop where the existing shareholder would come in. But as required, and again, sorry, this is bordering on the legal, so you'll have to ask probably the lawyers, but UDENA was not allowed, it's not the right word, right? Not allowed, but it had to waive its rights to participate on the first few stages. So it would only be able to come in at the last part, thereby allowing the public to participate. So again, it was not a choice of UDENA not to participate. It was not, tama ba, Eric? I'm not sure if the word is allowed, but it had to waive its rights.
I think it will. The provision actually is to favor existing shareholders,
excluding
the parent or to take on the shares at the discounted price. So anything left on the table not subscribed is backstop.
Okay.
By the parent to take on.
We're assured that your 8 billion now will be funded more or less. So, we have a lot of questions, guys. Sorry nag-11 o'clock na rin. Ganda ng kwentuhan natin Okay lang, we extend tayo Pwede ba?
Okay lang. Blow pa.
We have more than 200 questions. So, eto muna. From Marco. As an investor, are we still on track for positive growth in the next 4 to 5 years? You're quoted as to be profitable in 5 years daw. Are we still on track? Quickly lang.
Quickly, typically startup telcos make a turn 3 to 4 years. Maybe more rapid if the market shift into digital is even more dynamic. Here in the Philippines, as I said, the prospects are good because we are the only country with only 2 mobile players, and the third player is one. So maybe Joe can give more color on the question.
No, it's pretty much consistent with what I was going to say. Typically, again, we can't, for obvious reasons, we cannot give forward-looking statements. So we're not allowed, or the will violate disclosure rules. But typically, 4 years would be the general area where we would then turn into black, from red.
Yes,
that would be typical.
Yes.
Related to that would be the second question, I guess. Is that how you see it?
Let's try to answer it quickly para marami tayong masagot. Sige.
Again, I cannot tell you exactly where we will be 5 years or 10 years from now. That would be tantamount giving up our projections. But again, just ask yourself, maybe, because the investors are actually consumers. That's the unique thing about DITO Tel, right? The investor is buying something which he himself can use. So the answer to that second question actually can be answered by each investor. Where would you buy Telco? I mean, would you buy Telco? Would you subscribe to DITO Tel, right? What would keep you subscribing? The answer is that if you have better service, why not? So therefore, you ask yourself, in 5 years or 10 years, typically, would we get a third? Mathematically, we would be, if you're a equal player, of course, we feel we are more than equal, but at the very least, right, we would be around a third, right? So the question is, will we get there?
Quickly, Eric.
Marvin, given the shift in technology, I think we have a good partner and we have a good chance. Because our partner is a leading force in the emerging technologies. That's inevitable.
Probability is high. Okay, good. Next group. On growth plans, can you give, from Mark, can you give a brief overview of your sustainable solutions? Sustainability to Eric, to stay in competition. I guess you've answered most of that. quickly lang, future plans then for 2022?
Just quickly on that one, I don't think our partner has problems with the financial matters. On our side, the entry of as mentioned earlier, the new law would give us much more options. Diba?
Good. Sige. Next group of questions. Competition. How do you plan to compete with PLDT and Globe despite the current COVID situation, from Roy? And what is your strategy to gain significant share? What is the strategy? Is it speed?
Having understood the industry for almost 2 decades now, and quite deeply at that, I think our biggest edge, number one, no legacy. No legacy, both on infra and organization and culture. All digital orientation, all brand new network. Nothing to manage in terms of transformation. And second, again, the commitment of both the local partner and the right foreign partner, particularly in terms of both technical know-how and financial muscle.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can, sorry, just very, very quickly lang, sorry. Again, I mentioned this earlier, right? The best way to answer this question is to try us. You answer your own question, right? So, I mean, for a 49 peso or a 199 peso investment, to back up your investment of maybe hundreds of thousands and 1 million pesos in shares, why don't you buy a SIM and try us out? Then you answer the question. Are we better or worse than our competitors?
Tanong ka na rin, you have 5 million subscribers, sabi nyo. Ano ba yun?
Yeah.
They tried it out, or are they loading up? Are they?
Yes.
How is the experience?
Well, I would like to believe, again, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, right? They wouldn't remain if they're not happy. So again, this is not a branding, well, it's not so much a branding issue. This is really a service quality issue. Unless you're in love with your provider, why would you stay with an inferior provider? Theoretically, right? Meaning he who gives, in fact, the choice between Smart and Globe, for example, is a question of who's the better provider in your specific location. I have no signal in my house. Okay, so for my provider, I'm not gonna mention who it is. No? But DITO obviously does. So again, my point is that how do we compete? Well, we believe we have the better quality. Where there is signal, remember, we're not yet 100% available everywhere.
Yeah.
That's a law of physics. We have to build more stations. We will continue to build more stations. So the strategy, in a short answer, is all about execution. If we execute, how can we not be better?
Yeah. And by July, we will have this 70% coverage. Siguro naman, dito sa Quezon City, abutin na ako dito. Masubukan ko na yun.
Well, in Quezon City, if you try our mobile services, we're sometimes faster even than the broadband connection. I know customers that have used our and used their phones or bought a CPE from Lazada, stick the DITO SIM in there, and it's actually more reliable and faster than their existing broadband.
Okay, next group of questions. Oops, political. Siyempre, tatanungin to. From Noel, what is the outlook of DITO in terms of assuring the stockholders of continuous confidence in them after the elections?
I have faith that business should be apolitical, no? And I have faith that the proposition that DITO brings to the country, no, by providing an alternative and competition to a duopoly, a two-player market, is most beneficial. Eventually redounds to the benefit of Filipino consumers. So it will be sad if there's any change to that view, because ang hindi makikinabang dito yung taong bayan. Kasi ngayon nakikita na natin.
Yeah, but the 25-year franchise has been already extended. So it's not that, technically, I don't see what the new set of leaders will do.
Right.
It's been approved. It's been granted.
So
the answer is, we're expecting that there should be no change. No change. There's continuity of governance, and this was passed, and except for the few noise here and there ought to be no change in the business of the third telco.
Sige, okay, next. Thank you. Okay, dividends. Kailan daw kayo magbibigay ng dividends?
Si Joe,
Yung dalawa, magandang dividend payment.
Yeah, well, okay. Dividends is a function of profit. So in the first place, I think it is highly unlikely. Not unlikely. I think it goes without saying that their profitability is not in the near-term prospect. And besides which, there is a term loan, and typically, term loan covenants would require certain things to happen before dividends are going to be released. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is that if the intention of investing in DITO CME is dividend yield, I think you should look somewhere else.
Okay. Having said that,
not in the short term. Not in the short term.
Being a formidable challenger to the space, in the first 2 years until that profit happens, you can see that there's continued commitment to roll out assets on the ground and gain ground. So there's what we are positively anticipating is there'll be capital asset appreciation.
Okay.
Yeah. No, in fact, just to drive the point, I mean, you have to decide whether you're buying a stock because of the dividend yield or the asset appreciation. I mean, I will recently, if you're familiar with the telco, there was a telco, I will not mention whose value suddenly jumped up, and I'm talking about the stock price, because they included the value of a non-telco subsidiary that was recognized as adding value to that company, and therefore the stock price went up. Did they increase their dividends? No. It did not increase the dividends. It's not like the income suddenly went up, right? No, in fact, it did not.
That was Marvin. Apart from the aggressive rollout of the challenge on a purely non-legacy digital platform on the telco, we're also putting up those digital companies, and they're coming up very nicely as well. So these are additive to us. And complementary to the telco.
I think we have one more set, pero we'll go to the live. Sige. Next, DITO stock price. I'm not sure you can comment, but if you can comment, what is your recommendation for those who do not have DITO stock? Should you buy or hold or wait for pullback?
I think the answer is moot and academic.
Ito na lang, second question by Wendell. What will be the specific action of the company to deal with the major setback in relation to the declining market price?
Yeah, Eric, you want to answer this?
To your answer, Joe, and I believe it's only to be true and committed to the mission at hand, which is to deliver differentiated and superior services to what the public is getting now. And that will, mobile services, particularly data, is going to be inevitable utility for all consumers. Whether we like it, andyan na yan, it's as in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's way up there. You talk to anyone, mawala na maiwan yung wallet, wag lang yung cellphone, diba, sa bahay. So inevitable na yan. Now, even through basta hindi lang nuclear scorch or scenario, it's as vital as water and food, diba? So having said that, setbacks, declining market price notwithstanding, the best way we could ensure our longevity and sustainability is to deliver what the market wants.
Deliver. And also, Erica, explain it to the market. So in these kinds of conversations that we will have.
Oo, salamat sa iyo, pare. It's really helping us deliver the message, which may not.
If I may just add directly to the second question. I mean, okay, first off, as a matter of rule, normally the company and company executives like us, it's not our job to push the stock price. It's our job to run the business.
Yep, right.
If you run the business well and you achieve the expectation of the market, the stock price will move. Unless it is something outside the control of the company, like the scorch earth scenario that Eric mentioned, that brings the stock price down, but that has nothing to do with us, right? So a company who focuses on the stock price, I would be concerned about. The company should focus on its performance and meeting its targets, which is something. I guess I'm speaking more for the DITO, the operating company.
Good.
So we're hired. The executives are hired to run the company. It's not to manage the stock price. Otherwise, I would be a fund instead of an operating company.
Sige, thank you. Now we have a lot of questions in the chat box, but some of them are being answered already. I asked your Leo, your IR officer, to keep on answering them as well. So you guys can keep on bringing in your live questions. We'll try to answer them as we continue this conversation. But let me just highlight some of them. Some of the Zoom questions by E-A. How are you addressing technical issues that the company is facing now with 5G limitations at this point, as many Filipinos still don't have 5G capable? Are you excluding this market segment in your market strategy?
Yeah, if I may, Eric, I'll take this one. No, first of all, there is probably a misconception that we are only a 5G company. We are not. We are predominantly, frequencies are predominantly 5G, yes, but it does not disallow 4G. So you don't have to have 5G capability. You don't need a 5G device to access DITO. In fact, majority of our subscribers, you mentioned the 5 million subscribers earlier, majority of them are still 4G. So you don't need 5G. You can get 4G, but admittedly, not all 4G devices can access the DITO network because of the frequencies. No? So, but eventually, so now to answer your question more directly, if you're talking about 5G, that would be, if you go back a few years ago, people were asking, when are smartphones going to come down? People started out with feature phones. I'll even go further back for those who are older or as old as me, when it was talk and text, right? Under analog, then you had to go up to GSM. When PLDT moved over to Globe, because Globe launched GSM, you had to get a GSM phone. And then from GSM, you had to go from 3G to 4G to access the faster speeds and to access a smartphone where you now had data rather than using simply talk and text. All of those phones were expensive at the onset. You remember how much the Motorola California phones were when they first launched? They're exorbitant, right? But as the loss of supply and demand, so eventually 5G. Now we are not a vendor. We are not a phone vendor. So we have no control over the prices of 5G phones. But law of supply and demand. Even our competitors are already rolling out 5G globally. 5G. It's not even a question. It is the next technological leap. So if you look at the market, 5G phones are expected to come down drastically this year.
Yeah. Okay. Sige, Jo.
Just to add, Marvin, very quickly, technology is about Moore's law, and that's been proven, as Jojo alluded to, many times over and over and over again. That in every 2 years or so, the compute power doubles and the price gets half. Right?
Oh, let's do it quickly. Alam ko meron kayong another session but marami pa tayo. Let's do some of them naman. Short questions lang para masagot natin mas marami. Okay, from Homer, most countries doubt data security about Chinese telco companies. How can public be sure?
Nasagot na ata ni Jojo yan that let's add to it, no. Most telcos, save for those that have a prohibition on Chinese vendors, no? Most telcos in the world, including Philippine telcos, predominantly use Chinese technology. So that's one. Second, we're not reliant on pure Chinese technology. As Jojo alluded to, we look at best-of-breed global providers for particularly niche capabilities, such as for cybersecurity. We're non-Chinese solution provider. We're relying on non-Chinese solution providers for this. In fact, America.
Okay.
Yeah. Just very quickly, first, this is a misconception. No? We are not a Chinese telco. We're a Filipino telco that is majority owned by a Filipino. China Telecom is the partner. It is managed by a local management team. The security head is a Filipino, ex-military Filipino general. So the issue about data privacy has nothing to do with the equipment. It has to do with the people. So a box is inert. It cannot spy. It cannot release your information. It's what the person who has access to the box that can actually release the information. So the question would be better posed, is the management team, for example, credible? Then I would pose the same question to our competitor. It's the same.
Okay. Sige, next.
A good point, Joe.
Next question, please. Marami pa tayo. Maraming tanong dito. But some are being answered already. Buti naman yan. Oh, ito naman from Delnar. When they will offer the 5G broadband to compete with other telco providers.
I guess when will. I think that's when will.
When will they offer?
Well, first to clarify, Converge doesn't have a mobile capability. So they're really fixed. So it's PLDT and Globe, and we're offering it right now in rollout, but in areas where our analytics say this can be used. So
pag covered na, meron ka ng 5G.
In some areas, not all.
Yeah.
So we're switching, and as we switch on the network, obviously, in areas where our analytics say there are no possible 5G users, we don't switch on the 5G capability. So our analytics indicate, makikita mo naman in your network analytics kung ano yung kind of users, if they're using what kind of phone, and from other studies, other analytical studies. So when there's a densification of 5G potential market, that's where we switch on the 5G.
Okay.
And it's going to be evolution.
Sorry, just to answer more directly. Soon. Very soon.
Yeah.
Sooner than you think. Okay.
Sooner than you think.
Sige, next. Siguro, let's have a couple more questions para makapagpahinga kayo before your next. If Globe has GCash, Smart has PayMaya, what do you have with DITO? E-wallet, etc. Cash technology from Albert.
Well, we're looking at the space. We're not totally eliminating that. But we feel that the space is already very tight and overcrowded. Apart from the incumbents play, there are non-telco plays here, particularly with the entry of Shopee, Lazada, Pay, etc. Plus the what you call that, legacy banks are turning digital as well. Maybe that's not an area that we are immediately looking at, but we're certainly looking at other fintech plays, not necessarily wallet.
Ayun, last. Kasi last na natin. What is the churn percentage of DITO subs? Yung existing 5 million nyo, what's the churn rate?
Okay, maybe I can answer this. Okay, first off, the NTC has a rule that says that you have to consider subs that are present for at least a year. So whether there is, let me put it a different way. It's only if there is no activity or no top up with beyond 1 year that you can actually churn them out. You can take them out as subscribers. So for obvious reasons, the churn for 2021 is zero. Technically,
they just tried it out.
Technically, no, but of course we all know that's not the reality, right? So we don't know what the actual churn will be. We'll know it this year. Of course, there will be. What do we do to mitigate this? There's only one. You maintain your service. Again, the truth of the pudding is in the tasting. If you're getting good signal, if you have a signal, not good. If you're getting a signal and you're getting speed that is superior to your competitors, why will you churn? People have churned between the two because they're unhappy with their current. Nagpiping-pong lang yan. That's why, regardless of who claims to be the number one in terms of market share, for all intents and purposes, the market is split down the line.
So, Joe, the better question siguro is, of your 5 million subscribers, ilan dyan ang nag-load up? Di ba prepaid to? Prepaid kayo, di ba? So, ilan dyan ang nagre-reload?
It varies. So a lot of them reload, but then sometimes there's a pause. Sometimes there's a gap. So it becomes a little difficult to, depending on what that reckoning point is. So as I said, there will definitely be churn. We are confident that our churn will be less than the industry practice, which I think is between 5 and 6% per month, if I'm not mistaken. So we anticipate that it will be less than that. But also remember that a lot of people sometimes they subscribe and then they find out that there's no signal in their area, so they're much to churn yon. But it doesn't mean that they will not come back when there's finally signal. As I said, we continue to build more networks. So many reasons why they would or would not become or rather top up. So we will see. We shall see. But again, for me, the best test is buy a SIM and try it. It's only
so to get
Marvin, just quickly lang, zero-sum game to. The market is fully saturated. In fact, 135, 140% saturated. So we're here to eat market share from somebody, and that's going to be the name of the game. As we two things: as we commit to roll out, and we are committed to roll out more in more areas, and number two, that we keep the experience, particularly of speed, better than the.
So itong 30% mo market share, how many subs does that mean?
Well, if you just, of the 135%, double SIMing naman yung 35% dyan. I would imagine that there are truly 80 million subscribers net, unique users, So lagyan mo na 90, 10 million bata na hindi gumagamit. So 30 is 30 million, quick and dirty.
But to be profitable, mga ilan na subs ang kailangan?
Profitable ka na nun. Sigurado, kung di ka pa nagpo-profit nun, may problema yung cost mo. Hindi naman kami, our cost we will keep low, very low. We will not hire very expensive endorsers that will sing and dance.
Wala tayong endorser. We have no endorser.
No, we have some local ones that are Filipinos, from social. Yeah, but yung mga stars that we will spend, we'd rather put it to the value of the, as I mentioned, value for money equation.
Great. Ang haba na ng kwentuhan natin, Eric. Sorry, overtime na. So, sige, let's wala na tayo. Lumalampas na tayo. I'd just like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation.
Marvin, salamat. It's been quite a while. Maybe 25 years since we last told each other.
Hindi ko na natawag si Donald at si Nerissa kasi kayang-kaya nyo na. Sorry. So, Eric, siguro last word to our viewers now.
Well, on behalf of DCME and my colleagues, many thanks to you, Marvin, and COL, and to all your customer audience. No, thank you for joining. I note that I think we hit about 1,000 audience today. Maraming salamat. I think what we're saying here is that even before we started, we already contributed to public service and good by keeping the competition in the market healthy. Again, we have committed ownership from the Filipino side and also on the foreign side in China Telecom. Very formidable with the technical expertise to bring forth the mission on hand into fruition and success. So this is not as I mentioned in many interviews, hindi naman to sprint. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it will go through the marathon. I think what is important is that we stick to the milestones and achieve those. And hopefully with this webinar and similar undertakings, the public will better appreciate and understand what we do and the progress at which we do. Salamat, Marvin. Thank you for this opportunity.
With that, maraming salamat, Eric, Jojo.
Thank you.
Donald,
thank you.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Keep safe. Keep safe,
everyone.
Salamat.
Allow me to close this session to give you some of our key takeaways. As we heard from DITO, is continue to perform within their targets so far, and hopes to become the third telco and offer better telecom service in the country. While the market may seem to be fully penetrated by the PLDT and Globe existing players, service improvement is much to be desired. And from this conversation, we hear that they have a lot of service to offer, a lot more service to offer. We actually saw that activity of eating the current market share through Converge, through the broadband. And technology is moving fast. What generates revenues today may not be generating later, and you really have to keep up with the times. But to achieve this third telco, however, DITO will have to make huge investments requiring strong support from the parent company as well as strong support from China Telecom. To be profitable in 5 years, as they say, as they target, implementation, of course, for its demanding infrastructure layout will remain key. We will just have to keep a close eye on the group and see if they indeed been able to realize their targets and generate profits and cash flows and dividends that will eventually benefit the shareholders. In looking at this investment, we are reminded of what our Chief Technical Analyst, Juanis Barredo, shared to us to the COL community before regarding the life cycle of new businesses, their company stock price cycle, so to speak. For new businesses, they go through an exploratory phase and move to a business phase. We see the behavior of the stock price through the journey of this cycle, from the speculative period where we see the stock price rise to new highs, and then speculators leave, moving to the orphan period. We see the stock price drop to a period of very low interest. Then they now move to when the real business and real production kicks in. Revenues come in, income is generated, attracting now the institutional investors. We saw that in Globe, for example, from the early parts of the history, from the speculation to the orphan period, where there was no interest until actual business production kicks in. And the rest is history. We saw strong support from their parent company, Ayala Corp, and their partner, Singapore Telecom. But they had to go through many, many challenges, and it took them many, many years before getting to where they are today. Now, are we going to see that in DITO? Are we now in the orphan period where there is no interest? The questions are, will they be able to implement their plans? Will they get the needed support from parent and China Telecom? Will they generate profits and attract institutional investors in the future? So those are really the questions only time will tell. We have heard what the people behind the company has presented and answered your questions. I hope we have given you information to help in your investment decision. Like what we always remind investors, manage risk through proper allocation and always invest with long-term in mind. On our part, we will continue to follow the developments of the company, especially their expansion program and how effective they are in delivering. And we will share them with you through our updates and research reports. Today's event video will be shared through our social media channels. We will also give you highlights of our research via email. And for those who want to continue getting our invites in the future in COL Conversations, sign up through bit.ly/COL Conversations events so you can get our invitation. So with that, thank you for watching. This has been Marvin Fausto. See you in our next conversation.